Arden, as Nicholas was saying, it's a journey to learn how to case. And so I want to start by saying that wherever you are in the journey, you're on your way. And I know that it takes a lot of preparation to do well in these sorts of interviews with many of the top firms, including Kearney. So excited to take you through a case today, Nicholas. In the spirit of the Women's World Cup going on right now, I'm a big sports fan. So this is not a Kearney case, but rather one that I wrote myself about a soccer nonprofit. So we'll dive right in. But just a couple of things, we're going to have fun today, and hopefully the group on the call will have fun along with us. All right.
Certainly.
All righty, cool. So our client is Ligas Femeninas. We're going to call them LF today. They are a nonprofit soccer league for women in Peru. And the founder, Alex, set out to create a space for women to play recreational soccer, which didn't exist anywhere, really, prior to LF. And their mission is to provide a safe space for women to play sports. And as I mentioned, the focus is currently soccer. So LF has been really successful with revenue generation in its first few years, but they've come to us today with a twofold ask. The first is that they are looking to increase their annual revenue by 25% to achieve their growth goals in the next year. And the second piece is that they're also interested in hearing from you, Nicholas, about how they can really maximize their mission and just creative ideas for how to bring that to life. So how do you recommend that they achieve that two-pronged goal?
Certainly, first of all, I want to say I'm very excited for this case. Coming from Colombia, soccer is a big thing, so I'm very excited for this. Now, would you mind if I give you a quick recap of the case to make sure that I got everything and all of the information necessary?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So our client here is LF Ligas Femeninas, who is a nonprofit located in Peru, and they are a soccer league. Their mission was essentially to create a safe space for women in recreational soccer. They were quite successful in their revenue generation in the first few years, and now they hired Kearney for two specific goals, which were first, increase their annual revenue by 25% to achieve the goal next year, and the second thing, just maximize their mission through creative ideas. That seem like a fair recap for you?
That's exactly right.
Sounds awesome. So I do have several clarifying questions that I would like to ask, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Certainly. So my first clarifying question is, so the timeline, just to clarify, timeline would be to achieve this goal of 25 or increasing revenues by 25% in the next year. So we have a timeline of about a year.
Yes. So we're making quick moves here.
That sounds great. That's awesome. The second question that I have deals with the I guess not business model because it's not generating profit, but the way they operate. So you mentioned that they provided spaces for recreational soccer. Is that still the case, or have they moved on to other ventures such as professional soccer or any other ventures like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So they currently have two kind of main sort of channels for soccer. The first is what we call regular leagues. So that is including leagues for individuals, just like social sports in, cities in the US. It also includes academies for girls to play soccer kind of growing up, right? So adults and children. And then the second is what we call special leagues. So this is more of a corporate focused thing. So, if a company wanted to have a team, they could do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Perfect.
So 3 different channels, I guess. One for adults, one for children, and one for companies. Sounds awesome.
All right, sorry. Let me just quick clarify. The first 2 are kind of in one.
Oh, the first 2 are in one.
Yeah, and then the third is correct. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, not a problem. And I have one final clarifying question, which was
Certainly.
In terms of geography. So you mentioned that they were located in Peru. Is that still going to be the same in this case, or are they looking into expand, or have they expanded into other countries, other regions?
For purposes of today, we can stick to Peru, but I appreciate the dream big perspective there.
Yeah, great. Awesome. I think I have all the information I need for now. So would you mind if I take a moment to structure my thoughts?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, great. So I think I have a structure ready for you. So there are 4 different categories that I would like to explore here. These 4 categories are: first, the price at which our players are paying, or the total amount that they're spending. The second category would be the quantity of, for instance, entries to our ligas, to our leagues here. And I will get into more details later. The third category would be our other leagues that are acting as competitors. The fourth category would be Ligas Femeninas in itself, as a liga, as a league, or as a company, in this case, a nonprofit. I would like to learn more about them. So going back to the first category that I had, I would be very interested in learning more about the pricing strategy that they have been implemented. More specifically, I would be interested in knowing the prices of entries to these leagues through for instance, through the different segments that we have identified, such as the two main segments, or two main channels, which are the adults and children, and the companies as well. I would be interested if we are segmenting by segment, in this case, our prices, if we're charging, for instance, lower for children in the academy, or higher for adults. Now, the second category that I would like to explore, which I mentioned, was quantity. First of all, I would like to know how many children we have in the academies, how many adults are playing in the recreational leagues, and how many companies we have been able to get to play in our leagues. And with that, how many players within those companies as well. I believe that it would give us a very important insight for later on in this case. I think that would be for my second category. For my third category, which was competitors, I'm very interested in knowing whether there are other leagues, perhaps regional or local leagues, that are also nearby, perhaps that our customers or our players are going to, whether these players are also going to competitors simultaneously as with us. That was my case when I was in high school. I used to go to two different leagues, or perhaps they just choose one league. And I would also I'm very interested in knowing the differentiating factor of other competitors. Now, moving on to my fourth and final category, I'm very interested in Ligas Femeninas as a company itself, as a nonprofit. First of all, I would like to know their marketing channels. More specifically, how are they advertising per segment through our different segments of adults, children, and companies? The second thing that I would be interested within the same category would be our operational costs in this case. So, for instance, I'm very interested in learning the hourly rates that we're paying to referees. I understand that when I was playing soccer in leagues, that was one of the main things. I would also be interested if we have any volunteers, if these referees are acting as volunteers or not. I'm also interested in the maintenance costs of just maintaining the soccer field. So I understand that involves a lot. I'm also interested with that. Some certain fixed costs that go along with that, for instance, utilities, how much it costs us to rent these facilities, etc. And I believe those would be all of my four categories. So with that being said, first, I would like to explore the first category that I mentioned, which was the price of our entries, or how much these segments are spending. Do we have any information on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen.
Great. Yes, I'm able to see it here.
Fabulous.
Awesome. Okay, would you mind if I take a moment to analyze this graph here,
Sure.
or this exhibit? Thank you. Okay, sounds great. So it seems like we have two different categories of very important information. The first one would be the revenue distributed by the different revenue streams that we have, which in this case are going to be the regular leagues of kids and adults, and the special leagues and other funding. And for the other part of this exhibit, I see that we have the projections. I'm assuming it would be for this year. Does that seem for 2022 in this case?
Yes. Well, what we expect to be at the year end, I suppose, is a good way to think about it.
Okay, at the year end of 2020. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. And it's very interesting that, as you mentioned, I believe in this case, looking at the financial of the revenue streams that we have, we are seeing an overall increase in the revenue. More specifically, we're seeing that each of these categories of our revenue streams are increasing as well, which is a quite interesting insight. Now, looking at the other exhibit, I see that we have here 600 players. Okay, so it seems like we have 600 players for the regular leagues and 25 teams in the special leagues. And by 25 teams, I take it that it's 25 different companies, or can different companies compete within different teams compete within the same company?
So yeah, it could be different companies, but it could also one company could have multiple teams, for example. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Okay, and I see that. Okay, so each team is bringing about $1,000 in revenue. Each player in the regular leagues about $45, and another fund. And interesting, we have gifts. So that appears to be an important factor to consider in this case, which is $28. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good. That is very important information. With that being said, it appears that our pricing strategy seems to be effective, considering we have an increase in revenues. However, we are looking to achieve this 25% increase here as an objective. So, and we also have information about the projected units and quantities. That's very interesting. Now that we have this, do we have any perhaps other information regarding to competitors? Perhaps if we can compare their revenues, their any financial information that we may have?
Fair question. I think for now, we don't have a ton of competitors for LF. But, I think it might make sense for us to circle back to our original kind of 2 questions and how we might use this information to get there.
Yeah, certainly. So our original 2 questions were, first of all, how we can increase the revenue by 25% in this case. And the second question was maximizing our mission. So here we have we have $70,000 revenue for the year of 2022. So I would, just to put it in perspective, I would like to calculate the 25% of that to see where we would need to be in our next year. Does that seem like an okay calculation to make for now?
I think what might make more sense is if we're looking at 2024 is figuring out what we think the 2023 revenue might be, and then going to 25%. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it does make sense. I understood that the year we were looking at was 2020. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So calculating the revenue for today's year, which is 2023, that makes sense. Awesome. Would you mind if I take a moment to lay out my logic for that? Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So in order for me to calculate the revenue for this year, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to calculate the total revenue per segment that we have here. So for the 3 different segments, I'm going to multiply the projected units times the revenue per unit to get the total revenue per segment, and which is what I'm about to do now. So does that seem like an okay procedure to
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So looking at regular leagues first. So we see that we have 600 players, and I'm going to multiply this by 45, which is the revenue per unit, to get the total revenue in the segment. And if you allow me 1 second to make this calculation here.
Sure.
This is going to be $27,000. Does that seem like a correct number? That's what I got too. Awesome. Great. $27,000 here for regular leagues, and for special leagues, let's see here. And making sure that I'm as organized as possible with this. So the projected units that we have is 25 teams, and each team is contributing around $1,000. So I'm going to multiply 25 times 1,000, which is going to give me 25,000.
Yep.
And for the other funding, which is gifts in this case, we have 1,000 gifts, which is the quantity. I'm going to multiply it by 28, which is the average gift size. And this is going to give me $28,000. Now, if I add all of these numbers, I'm going to get, if you allow me 1 second here. Yeah, it should be, I was just making sure that I'm in math correct here. So total revenue for the year of 2023 of $80,000. Does that seem like a correct number to you?
80, right? Yes, 80.
$80,000. Yes, 80. And this number appears to be a very important number because it shows that we are. Oh, sorry, okay.
We were done with that part, so I just took it down.
Oh yeah, no problem. I just wanted to quickly mention that this number appears to be a very important number considering we were at 70,000 the year before. So we are seeing a constant increase in our revenue, which is important for our goal here, which is achieving an increase of 25%.
Yeah. Cool. So where do we go now?
Yeah. Sorry. I was just making sure that, we were done with that part. So now that we've had looked at both of the two initial things that I wanted to look at, which were price and quantity, and you mentioned that we did not have any information on competitors or that weren't as important in this case. So I'm going to rule this part out. I would be very interested in knowing or learning more about Ligas Femeninas itself. So perhaps if we have any information on our employee headcount or perhaps in our different operational costs that we incur on a yearly basis.
Yeah, sure. Well, we could talk about that for a little bit. But one quick thing I wanted to double back on. So just circling back to our questions, remind me what the first question was again?
Yeah, the first question was increasing on annual revenue by 25%.
So now that we know what the revenue is for this year, do we know what our target is?
Yeah, certainly. So we would have to, what I would do first, so since we are in the year 2023 and we have a revenue of $80,000, then I'm going to take 25% of that and I'm going to add it on top of $80,000. So I would like to, the trick that I like to use usually, actually there's an easier way to do this. So 25% of 80 is essentially dividing 80 by 4, which is 20 in this case. If we add $20,000 to $80,000, we see that our goal for next year is going to be $100,000.
Great. Perfect. Yeah. I think it's always important to contextualize what is our goal and what's the gap so that we can pursue the opportunities that will achieve that. Right. And circling back to your question about Ligas Femeninas. So the good news is that we don't really have competitors. Leadership is pretty stable. I think the brand has good recognition. So I think we're really poised to grow. One update that I can provide for you, Nicholas, is that the leadership is really open to ideas. And, if there's some things that are maybe on your mind about, all right, how are we going to get $20,000 and how does that work for our company? Maybe we could brainstorm that together.
Yeah, certainly. Would you mind if I take a quick moment to structure my thinking?
Go for it.
Okay, so far I have two different categories of ideas to which we could actually maximize our mission and increase our revenue. The first category that I have would be extracurricular activities. And what I mean by that is activities that are not necessarily leagues or any type of competitive activity. And the second category that I have would be diversifying our marketing channels. Now, going back to the first category that I have would be extracurricular activities. From my personal experience volunteering and being a part of a soccer league, I found it very successful to see festivals happening during the weekends. And this would be during weekends through which they don't have any games or perhaps nothing's happening. Festivals are a great way of getting more people together and building a sense of family within the community of Ligas Femeninas, and also through different festival venues and different things like we could put in the festival, we could increase our revenue. Another thing that I was thinking in this same aspect would be within these festivals, or perhaps as a side of these festivals, would be holding yearly gatherings in which we announce, for instance, yearly awards. And these festivals these gatherings could be formal gatherings. We could charge an entry for these. And with these gatherings, the league would essentially announce, for instance, the player with the most sportsmanship, or the company who had the highest number of wins, and things like that. Now, moving to my second category of marketing of our ideas, I'm very interested in diversifying our marketing strategy. one way through which we could do this is by sending perhaps representatives or volunteers or even children who are already playing in these leagues to advertise, or not necessarily advertise, but just put a good word for the league in their schools. Perhaps if we send a representative from our league to these local schools, then it would gather more people to go to our leagues. And knowing how popular soccer is, I find this very, very efficient. And another thing, within the same category would be put in advertisements on newspapers. I understand this is huge within local communities, still huge. And coming from South America, I understand that newspapers are still a big thing, and especially for older generations who may see these announcements or may see these advertisements and may consider getting their children to play for these leagues.
Very cool. I like these creative ideas. So the good news is, Nicholas, is that we actually were able to conduct an interview before we staffed you on the project. And it turns out that LF actually has some ideas as well and has done a little bit of a light assessment on some of them, but wants to hear what you think about these ideas.
Certainly. So I'm going to take a quick moment to see these ideas.
Sure.
Apologies, I had a quick question. So for the part-time salesperson, would the salesperson be in charge of selling entries to the tournaments, or would they be in charge of selling merchandise, the branded gear?
Oh, this person would be in charge of league sales. So it would be either individual players or the special league. So it would be regular league and special league focused. Okay,
sounds good. Sounds great.
Yep.
Interesting. So I see that we have 5 different ideas, and I also found that okay, interesting. And it appears that the idea with the most anticipated revenue impact would be the hiring the part-time salesperson, which is an idea that I would be very interested in considering, knowing that it's going to bring in so much revenue. The idea of targeting digital marketing does not seem as beneficial for the revenue. In terms of the investment, it makes sense that the hired part-time would have to have the highest investment in this case, and the target digital marketing would incur, or has the lowest investment, which makes sense. With that being said, would you mind if I take a moment to perhaps calculate the anticipated profit that each ideas would bring in?
Sure. Well, before we jump into that, just wanted to think through it slightly. So I think one thing to keep in mind is our budget, right? So we didn't quite talk about that, but I think we need to target a budget of about $10K. And then the other piece, can you remind me of our time frame?
Our time frame would be within the next year.
That's right. So and then how might you go about the profit piece for comparing these projects?
Certainly. So first of all, I would be I would be very interested in getting the. I apologize. Would you mind if I take a moment? I think I might have gotten another idea.
Okay, sure.
For this. Okay, so the first idea that I had, and the reason why I had to take a moment, was because I was thinking of perhaps taking just the anticipated revenue impact and subtracting the investment from that revenue impact. The second idea that I was thinking, considering we have a time frame, would be dividing the anticipated revenue impact by the number of months, and then getting the break-even point. Which idea would you consider best in this case?
Good thought. I think for purposes of this, how I would think about this is maybe a ratio of the revenue impact and the investment. And then I think for purposes of time, though I appreciate your thought there, let's just make sure that we could do it in a year. Does that make sense?
By that, you mean that we would be able, considering our budget? Is that?
Like just in terms of like the time to recognize the impact would need to be less than 12, right? Basically.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. So,
Perfect.
so just to make sure that I understand, this goal here would be just essentially trying to get the ratio of the anticipated revenue to the investment and seeing if this would be a reasonable or feasible solution to implement.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to take a moment now to do that.
Great.
Okay, so now I already laid out my structure, so I wanted to tell you what I'm doing here. So for the first, what I'm doing for each of these categories is that I'm taking essentially a return on investment ratio, which is essentially the anticipated revenue over the investment cost here. And this would give me, for instance, when I look at the first idea, I see that I have $15,000 in revenue impact over the investment, which is $10,000, which gives me a return on investment of 1.5, so around 50% on our investment, which seems great. And this idea seems feasible as well because it's under the time limit that we have. Yep. For the targeted digital marketing, I see that we have a revenue of $4,000 divided by $2,000, which is 2 in this case. So we have a return on investment of 100% in this case. Seems great. Actually, 200%. I apologize. Do those numbers seem like fair? Awesome.
Yeah, we're good.
For the third idea, which is the branded gear, we see that we have $8,000 over $2,000. This is going to give us $4,000. So we have a return on investment of around 400%. Seems great as well. Okay, looking at this, for the fourth idea, I actually did not want to do any calculations on this idea because it's past the time limit. So I'm going to skip it. Great. Yep. And for the final idea, we have 10 over 5, which is going to give us 2. So again, a return on investment of around, 100%. Yes, I apologize. It appears that I got the calculations right, but perhaps I might have not voiced them correctly. Do all of these calculations seem fair to you so far?
I think we're good. Yeah, 1.5, 2, 4. We skipped that one and then another 2. So awesome. Great. So what now?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to compare all of these ideas to see which one seems to be more profitable. And with that, I would also keep in mind our budget of $10,000. So with that, we see that, okay, first of all, I would not consider the idea of purchasing fields, considering it would take up all of our budget, and the return on investment is not even profitable as well. Do you concur with that? Okay,
I
great.
do concur.
Awesome. So we are eliminating 1 and 4. Great. So now we are left with 2, 3, and 5, which is marketing, branded gear, and basketball league. And it appears that if we implement all of these 3, we would be staying within the budget of $10,000. So might as well, and considering the substantial return on investment of each of these ideas, I think that it would be beneficial for a client to implement all of these ideas, staying within the budget and getting a quite substantial return on investment.
Yeah, and can you put a number on that substantial return on investment?
Certainly. So if we are looking at, do you want the number as a percentage or just want it as a total, like anticipated revenue?
I think a total number revenue would be perfecto.
Awesome. So we're looking at the anticipated revenue impact of the marketing idea, which is $4,000. We're adding that to the branded gear, which is $8,000. And we're adding that to $10,000, which then we are seeing $22,000 in anticipated revenue impact. And going back to our initial question, which was increasing our revenue by 25%, if I go back to this, we see that this actually does go over the 25% increase, which is awesome for us and for our client, meaning that through these strategies, we would be able to achieve our goal. And I think we would also be achieving both of our goals, maximizing our mission as well.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, cool. So I want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to kind of put a bow on this. But one last thing is we have a little budget left, right? We have $1,000, which admittedly is not much, but in the world of nonprofits, you use everything you got, right? So any thoughts, especially as it relates to part 2 of our question around mission, like how might you use that?
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to take a quick moment to think of some strategies that I could use that money with.
Certainly.
Okay, so I'm very invested in the idea of having a festival in this case, or carnival. So there are several things that we could implement in this carnival in order to increase a sense of community and maximize our mission to provide women a safe space to play. First of all, would be getting some rides for the carnival. They don't have to be as big, but I would certainly think that some small rides would be quite affordable for us. The second thing would be getting food. Some type of catering would be certainly great for parents and children as well. And finally, I would be very interested in getting one final idea perhaps to happen, which is, and this would be at no cost. I would be interested in getting someone from perhaps a local person that's perhaps a coach or a renowned soccer player. It doesn't have to be like super professional, super famous, but has to be local to come and speak at this festival. And usually with these type of characters, they are not going to charge anything because it's for the community. And we would essentially get a lot of traction and it would be very attractive for our Ligas Femeninas. And more specifically, it would be a plus if it were a woman, if it were a woman, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I love those ideas. All right, cool. Well, let's bring it in for landing, Nicholas. So can you go ahead and just kind of summarize everything for you if you were going to give a quick minute update to the leaders of LF?
Certainly. So it has been a pleasure working in this case here. So in order for us to increase our annual revenue by 25%, we should implement three different things: targeted digital marketing, starting our own branded line of gear. And there was another strategy that perhaps is coming out of my mind, but those would be the three main strategies that we would achieve. And by achieving these strategies, we would get to that mark of 25%. The ways through which we can maximize our mission would be by establishing a festival, with rides, food, and a renowned person from the local community. And finally, there are some risks with these strategies for sure to keep in mind. First of all, making sure that our costs are going to stay the same. I understand that, especially with the world of soccer, many things could go wrong, especially when it comes to weather, when it comes to things like that could increase our costs, perhaps for maintaining our fields or implementing these new strategies that we have and making sure that our costs remain the same. The second risk that I could think of would be being very careful when it comes to the rest of the budget that we have left and ensuring that we do not go past this budget through these other different activities that I mentioned. Finally, some next steps to look into. There are some things that I would definitely recommend our client keeping in mind. The first thing would be that since we're implementing new strategies, I would recommend the client also maintaining a careful watch on the other strategies that we have already been implementing on the leagues and ensuring that these new strategies are actually going to bring in more people. If they are not being as successful, then we could consider perhaps taking another route and being adaptable to the situation. Another next step that I would definitely keep in mind would be, in this case, just going back to our cores in terms of our client, just ensuring that all of these strategies are going to be aimed towards providing women a safe space, because I feel like oftentimes, considering the complexity of these strategies, we might go on a tangent, but just reminding the client to go back to their cores, which I think that they will definitely keep in mind.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Douglas. I think that LF will find all of this very helpful, and I'm so glad that you are on the team to help us solve this problem.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, first off, Nicholas, again, this is super brave to do something like this. And, overall, great job, leaning in and being adaptable to your point. So just a couple of high-level points that I'll start with. And just as kind of my own personal advice, I would say always keep the question top of mind, because, there's always exciting things to talk about, especially when you've got two smart people in a room doing a case. You can go wherever, right? So just making sure you keep the question, or multi-pronged question in this case, in mind. In terms of things that I look for in candidates, always looking for intellectual curiosity. How do you communicate? How's your executive presence? Which I thought you were phenomenal in that way, by the way. Structured thinking, but then also creative thinking, right? We want to be organized, but we also want to be fun, right? Not robotic. And we want to make sure that we are Thinking about traditional things and non-traditional things, as long as they are legal, ethical, et cetera, right? Cool. So in terms of the actual case, I think, you did a great job of recapping and understanding like what the question is, right? That kind of links back to my number one piece of advice, being super clear on what you're solving for, right? So nice job there. I think with regard to the framework, I generally recommend trying to keep the framework to 90 seconds to 2 minutes in terms of the time that you're sketching out. So just as you practice, I recall when I was in business school and practicing, I used a timer. And then with regard to the framework, I thought it was very complete. Obviously, when you're talking about revenue, you always want to have price and quantity. And then you had the piece around competitor and company, which is, I think, also very helpful. One other piece of advice regarding timing, I think sometimes it can be tempting to, spill all of your sort of exhaustive thoughts on the framework. And while I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, I do think that it can use time that could otherwise be used to sort of narrow down what are the priorities. And then, you can dive deeper into the priorities. So that's just something to be cognizant of. Walking through the exhibits piece, I think there's different thoughts around this and different practitioners. For me, when I see an exhibit, I tend to just talk through it rather than taking a moment. So I'll say something like, okay, it looks like we're looking at the revenue for each business line for 3 different years. And what I'm seeing is this. And then always feel free, and it didn't necessarily apply in this case, but if you have questions about what anything is, feel free to ask, right? It's always good to be crystal clear as to make the most of your time together. I loved how you aligned with me on the math to say, hey, I think we need to multiply these units by this, quantity of dollars. And then together that will get us our revenue. And being, well aligned on that. I think another critical piece, and it maybe not as applicable in this case, but just in general, is always making sure you know the unit of your output. In this case, it was dollars, but it can always be other things. Then kind of moving through, something else that I liked that you said in that part, you said something about ruling out the competitors piece. It's always great to prioritize. Ruthless prioritization in casing, I think, is the best practice because, again, there's always so many ways you could go, and you've only got about like 25, 30 minutes, right? Cool. So moving into the piece around the kind of the opportunity assessment. So I thought you did a nice job of being conversational with me in this part. It was a bit of an ambiguous exhibit, right? So you did a nice job of flexing. And then, I think whenever you've got an investment situation, clarifying the budget is good. And then generally, I think it's good to do a ratio. I think if you would have subtracted, it probably would have been fine too. But I think ratios are always kind of a best practice in terms of evaluating the attractiveness of an investment. And then with regard to the opportunities, I think you did a nice job of realizing that you could use your whole budget. Deploy the entire budget is what I mean to say. And then if there's ever anything left over, that's always your time to shine and showing your creativity and resourcefulness, and kind of giving it everything you've got for the client. And then you did a nice job of connecting back, hey, this is going to be $22,000. That's above our $20,000 mark. So that's good. And, tying it back to the question and then being able to tie it back to part B of the question as well. So with regard to the conclusion, again, I thought you were very polished in your speaking throughout. So great job there. You did a nice job talking about risks and next steps. I think one thing that I would encourage you to think about is making the risks and the next steps super targeted towards the solution that we proposed, right? So, targeted digital marketing, starting the brand gear, launching the basketball league. For example, targeted digital marketing, that to me feels like the easiest one to do. You just hire someone to help you with that, right? Versus like starting a brand of gear, you have to assess the vendors and determine the timelines and, figure out the steer of that. And launching a basketball league is kind of an ordeal as well, right? So just thinking through those. But overall, great job, Nicholas. I think you did a great job staying composed. And, again, just glad that we were able to run through this together.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I really appreciate it.